When river monsters vanished from television, fans were taken aback, and nobody had a definitive explanation. Millions of people watched the show, which attracted them to the enigmatic creatures, dark waters, and high-stakes interactions. But it just ended after 9 difficult seasons. What took place in the background? Why would a well-regarded wildlife television personality abruptly stop hosting a highly popular series? We're delving into the little-known backstory of river monsters today, which has been subtly ignored for years yet has the potential to permanently alter your perception of the program. Every monster was captured by him. Because it was losing steam, River Monsters continued. Neither network politics nor drama caused it to go out. No. The explanation was more uncommon and oddly fulfilling. The man who turned monster hunting into a worldwide craze, Jeremy Wade, just caught everything he could. River Monsters did something that very few shows ever do in a world when most of them strain to survive. It finished at the top because it had accomplished its goal, not because it had to. And it wasn't only a spectacle that the man behind it all did. Before the first season even aired, he overcame a lifelong obstacle that most people would have given up on. River Monsters was unique right from the start. This was not merely a fishing show. It combined elements of a wildlife thriller, detective narrative, and adventure series. However, there was a greater purpose behind each spectacular fishing line pull. For decades, Jeremy Wade had compiled a mental list of fabled, frequently fictional freshwater animals that had captivated scientists, frightened river towns, and plagued local folklore. These were shadow-dwelling monsters, including the notorious Goliath tigerfish with its rows of dagger-like fangs, predatory arapimas the size of small automobiles, and huge catfish that were accused of drowning villages. Tracking these organisms one by one was an optimistic idea that soon turned into something far more serious. Wade ticked another name off his list every season. Months passed for some, and decades for others. For instance, his white whale was the Goliath tigerfish. He searched for it for over 20 years. And it was more than just a catch when he did, in season 2. It was a turning point in his life. Through the Amazon, the Himalayan foothills, the Congo, and the wetlands of Southeast Asia, audiences followed Wade across continents as the seasons progressed. Wade's ambition also increased in tandem with the show's popularity. Second-hand tales and easy catches didn't satisfy him. Each fish had to have a strong ecological relevance, a sense of mystery, and a dread. The narrative was authentic, and the stakes were great. However, underlying all of the action on film was a somber truth. The list was becoming shorter. The number of creatures that still matched the show's basic idea decreased with each successive season. And the truth was revealed to Wade and the network alike when the last season aired in 2017. River Monsters wasn't officially cancelled by Animal Planet. They even celebrated it. Executives commended Jeremy Wade for his unparalleled ability to captivate an audience and transform scientific curiosity into gripping narratives. However, they also accepted the obvious fact. Finding legends was the foundation of River Monsters, but the legends were vanished. In a news statement, Wade stated it clearly. I had a list in my mind 10 years ago that looked unachievably ambitious, but today I've crossed everything off and more. It was among the most peculiar explanations for the termination of a show. Most hosts plead with networks for an additional season. Wade had nothing more to prove, so he called it quits. He had brought the most dreaded predators in freshwater history into the light, stared them down, and delivered their stories with wonder and honesty. It was bittersweet for fans. They understood, but they also wanted more. Wade had done a very uncommon thing. He was not cancelled. He prevailed. Fans discovered what Wade had to go through behind the scenes, just when they believed that was his last cast. The harsh reality that exists behind the scenes. The extent of Jeremy Wade's sacrifices to make each episode come to life was not always evident in River Monsters. The finished product, clean pictures of murky rivers, the moment of the catch, and the narration filled with scientific expertise and folklore, was presented to viewers, but it frequently hidden a laborious, hazardous, and grueling procedure. In actuality, Wade was dealing with more than just elusive fish. The scars he accumulated along the road weren't always physical. He was fighting against some of the most extreme circumstances on the planet. Few people risked to visit the locations where Jeremy Wade filmed. These weren't the usual wildlife hotspots or tourist attractions. They were isolated forests, unmarked riverbanks, and politically unstable areas with harsh living conditions and few outsiders. Wade frequently trekked for days to get to these locations, sometimes on foot and other times in makeshift dugout canoes, carrying survival food, fishing gear, and photographic gear through thick jungle and oppressive humidity. Trailers, conveniences, and shortcuts were all absent. Additionally, even while the show depicted tension, it didn't always convey the true danger. Wade had multiple bouts of malaria while filming. He acknowledged in one interview that he had passed out from weariness after spending hours in the blazing sun. There have been tennis ball-sized insect bites, potentially fatal tropical diseases, and nights spent sleeping in mosquito net tents beneath sky filled with suffocating heat and wailing animals. The surroundings were harsh but lovely. The areas without backup were possibly the most terrifying. Wade and his colleagues frequently operated without prompt medical assistance. A single misstep, a trip on damp rocks, a bug bite, or a collision with a territorial crocodile could have been fatal. Wade later acknowledged that there were times when he genuinely wondered if the show was worthwhile. But he pressed on each time. The world had either misinterpreted, disregarded, or forgotten him entirely because of his concern with documenting species. And the physical toll wasn't the only one. Spending weeks alone and continuously adjusting to new hosts, biologists, explorers, and leaders for a tiny crew while ensuring the final film met the high standards of the series accumulated psychological strain over time. That was the last piece of footage that met the high expectations of the series. That type of strain left its imprint, particularly when combined with physical exhaustion. Wade, however, hardly ever discussed any of this when the cameras were rolling. He maintained the emphasis on the myths, the people, and the fish. He was not interested in drawing attention to himself. That modesty contributed to River Monster's strength. Wade, however, gradually started to open up after the concert. He talked on how hard those years had been and how his health suffered from the constant travel, exposure, and lack of sleep. It gave viewers their first idea of how much he had endured in silence for almost 10 years. In retrospect, it's evident that Wade saw River Monsters as more than just a television program. It was a years-long, full-contact devotion that pushed him to the limit. From the outside, the adventure appeared exhilarating, and it was. Every spectacular catch, however, was the result of a man who had just made it through another week in an uncertain and frequently perilous world. However, that wasn't the final factor that ended River Monsters. Wade wasn't broken, but he was worn down. Although he still had the drive to continue, his next realization would completely alter his course. Furthermore, it was unrelated to ratings, survival, or the arduous process of manufacturing. It was all related to one silent, inevitable fact. However, the show terminated for reasons other than danger. What came next was even more unexpected. The list of monsters was authentic and comprehensive. From the outside, it appeared as though River Monsters would never end. Why would the stories ever run out when there are millions of rivers, dozens of fish species, and many local legends? However, Jeremy Wade himself admits that the show was never intended to go indefinitely. It had a goal, a very precise one, and there was a goal's end. Wade had made a mental inventory of the most enigmatic, horrifying, and mythical freshwater animals in the world long before the first episode aired. Not only were these uncommon species, but they were also mythical fish that the local population either misinterpreted or dreaded. Deaths had been attributed to some. Science had failed others. Not all of them were catches. They were tales. Additionally, the narrative had to be about more than simply a fish in the water in order to qualify as an episode of River Monsters. It has to be a combination of survival, myth, and mystery. The show was built around that list. And Wade hunted and eventually located every single thing on there over 9 seasons. Each season took viewers one step closer to finishing the adventure, from snakehead fish that frightened entire villages to catfish the size of grown men, from the arapaima in the Amazon to the Goliath tigerfish in the Congo. Eventually, it was finished completely, silently, and without any gaps. Jeremy Wade didn't want to prolong the situation. He was aware of what occurs when performances go on for too long. Viewers become disinterested. The narrative suffers. Additionally, the mystery that is at the core of River Monsters would diminish. He was unambiguous. The creature wasn't worthy of an episode if it didn't evoke real dread or interesting backstory. In order to keep the cameras running, he refused to impose fresh seasons that were rehashed or contained filler material. Rather, he took a choice that is rarely taken by anyone in television. While the show was still popular, he decided to end it. He demanded that it be concluded honorably. Wade and the Animal Planet crew chose to celebrate their accomplishments in the final season rather than weakening the brand. They did more than simply tie up loose ends. They left with some of their most notable stories to date. River Monsters last season was more than just a collection of episodes. The farewell was carefully planned. Wade added background and resolution by going back to some of the most memorable spots from previous seasons. Additionally, he pursued long-standing rumors about aquatic dangers, such as a mysterious sea monster in unexplored areas and a number of coral reef animals that were reportedly responsible for fatal attacks in Indonesia. These were original concepts. They were the final jigsaw puzzle parts. However, Wade's farewell was no longer primarily about the animals, even as the last fish were hauled out of the depths. It had to do with something more profound, more sacred. In actuality, river monsters have evolved beyond a mere spectacle. It was a representation, a unique fusion of exploration, learning, and unadulterated wonder. Wade was also aware that that symbol would wane if it went on without the original mission. He let it end to protect it. Wade cared more about the integrity of river monsters than airtime. And part of what made the show a modern legend was that decision, which was predicated on completion rather than collapse. The creatures were apprehended. We looked at the myths. And the enigma was honored by being given a chance to rest rather than being emptied dry. That wasn't the last shock, though, since Jeremy Wade did something that few people anticipated when the cameras stopped and the show ended. He made no proposal for a reboot. He did not relinquish control. He really did the exact opposite when offers came in. Wade's farewell was more than simply fish, though. The goal was to safeguard something even more revered. Why Wade declined a spin-off or reboot? Few things are permitted to finish politely in the entertainment industry of today. The business rushes to bring a successful show back to life after it ends. The market is overrun with spin-offs, sequels, reboots, and reimaginings. The temptation was the same with River Monsters. The program was, after all, one of Animal Planet's most popular programs ever. They believed that it had a recognizable host, a global fan base, and a format that was simple to copy. However, Jeremy Wade had no desire to prolong a completed narrative. He declined the offers when they were made. Indeed, discussions took place. In the background, network executives realized that River Monsters were still valuable. They proposed options, such as a legacy-style series where Wade trains someone to replace him, a spin-off centered on ocean predators, or a fresh version with various hosts, but none of them felt right to him. Although he heard, he refused. Wade never thought of River Monsters as merely a show about capturing large fish. It was about truth, mystery, and tension. And it would have been a betrayal of its essence to attempt to restart that magic merely to maintain it. It wasn't ego that made Wade refuse. It had to do with principle. He was afraid about selling out the concept. He had struggled to maintain a somber tone, accurate science, and a clear message throughout the original series. The foundation of River Monsters was a combination of real adventure, education, and conservation. Each tale has its roots in local mythology, actual peril, and environmental stewardship. He believed that converting that into a gaudy reality TV template with heightened stunts or overdone confrontations would devalue what they had worked so hard to create. Wade used his ability to know when to stop with complete awareness, which is a special strength. He took a back seat and allowed River Monsters do the talking rather than pursuing larger deals or clinging to his fame. His goal was for the last season to be just that, the last season. Not a single cliffhanger. Don't let go. Just a conclusion. This action is reminiscent of another well-known television farewell. Michael Landon made it obvious at the end of Little House on the Prairie by blowing up the whole hamlet of Walnut Grove. This is the end of the story. Although Jeremy Wade didn't require explosives, he displayed the same level of audacity by leaving. He feared that river monsters will be taken over by someone else and changed into something completely different. It had been a very intimate show. His voice, his principles, and his vision were all evident in each episode. It was like letting a stranger rewrite his life's work to let it go on without him. Many admirers admired Wade for it, even if some were sad that river monsters wouldn't survive in a different form. His choice was notable in a time when the majority of media products are constantly recycled. In order to maintain the integrity of a show that had always been about going deeper rather than longer, it was a tacit reluctance to make concessions. Wade was not merely defending a TV show. He guarded a heritage based on bravery, discipline, and inquiry. And he wasn't prepared to exchange that legacy for additional airtime or money. He had been bringing to light species that most people had never heard of, presenting stories that no one else could tell, and doing it with an amazement that was entirely real for almost 10 years. He didn't turn around when it was over. Wade revealed something else, a side of the tale that hadn't been included in the presentation, just as viewers were starting to comprehend and appreciate his choice. For years, he had said little about the event. Now, however, he started talking openly for the first time. Even his most loyal supporters were taken aback by what he said next. And it wasn't the only time Jeremy Wade's candor startled supporters. At long last, Jeremy Wade spoke up. Fans conjectured about the true cause of river monsters' demise for years. Was it fatigue? Scores? Politics in networks? Jeremy Wade had said very little. He made no big press announcements or go on a farewell tour. He just vanished from view as the concert came to a conclusion. Wade started to open up over time, though, and what he revealed gave the narrative a whole new depth. There was no drama. There was no scandal. It was truthful. Furthermore, it was more potent than any hypothesis fans had developed in its own right. Wade started to consider river creatures with a sort of serene inevitability in a series of introspective, silent interviews. He clarified that he had accomplished what he had set out to do, literally. The show's concept revolved around pursuing enigmatic creatures and watery stories that had frightened villagers, generated myths, and defied scientific explanation. However, such puzzles vanished after the 9th season. According to Wade, certain shows can go on indefinitely. Ours couldn't. He wasn't disappointed when he said it. He wasn't resentful or angry. He actually looked proud. Wade thought it would be dishonest to continue once the show's initial goal of searching, revealing, and demythologizing was accomplished. To keep the cameras running, it would have been simple to change the format, make up new threats, or begin pursuing less interesting species. Wade didn't want to pretend, though. He had too much respect for the audience to tell them anything but the truth. What finally caused him to leave was his sense of obligation to his audience, the animals, and the concept of the show. Wade acknowledged that it would have felt like a betrayal of river monsters' values to go on. The show was never about manufactured drama or ostentatious entertainment. It has to do with mystery and exploration. And the only proper thing to do was to let it go once there was nothing more to find in that particular universe. Wade was far from finished exploring, though. After seeing river monsters, he came to the realization that his curiosity had changed but not vanished. He started concentrating on the overall health of the ecosystems that those fish relied on rather than pursuing individual fish. That is how Mighty Rivers, his next show, came to be. Wade focused on the world's largest waterways this time, examining what was killing them, what was saving them, and how human activity was changing some of the planet's most vital lifelines. The mysteries of the deep then emerged, delving deeper into the inexplicable underwater phenomenon. It introduced Wade to an even greater variety of tales and articles, ranging from the strangest creatures to drowned cities, all of which retained his distinctive style, cautious skepticism, in-depth investigation, and unwavering commitment to the truth. With a fresh perspective, he provided the same enthusiasm, the same narrative, and the same scientific curiosity that made river monsters popular. One important finding from these endeavors was that Jeremy Wade was not a one-show wonder after all. He told stories for a reason. He wasn't a man who chased his own notoriety. He was an answer-seeking individual. He had the option of making river monsters into a never-ending commercial, but he decided to act honorably instead. Punctuated a few years later, it just confirmed why the show resonated so well with viewers. Just as he didn't require razzmatazz exits to let the truth speak for itself, it was never great melodrama. But as he ventured into unfamiliar ground, fans' realizations were only getting started. The spirit of this extreme adventure and the pursuit of the unknown endures in everything that Jeremy Wade touches, even if he has retired river monsters. But don't believe that Wade eased down after river monsters. Jeremy Wade's actions following the performance. Some fans thought Jeremy Wade would step back from the limelight once River Monsters concluded. Who could blame him for retreating after over 10 years of journeying to the extremities of the world and fighting off ferocious predators? However, it was not the case. Wade continued to move quickly. He changed direction. He jumped right into new endeavors, using his well-earned experience to further a larger goal. His new book would reveal a much more pressing threat, the deterioration of the very habitats that creatures called home, than river creatures, which was about revealing the truth behind tales. Wade changed the course with Mighty Rivers, his first post-river monsters project. He wasn't looking for mythical creatures this time. He was looking into the cause of the river's devastation. Every episode focused on a significant river that had once been teeming with life but was now exhibiting frightening indications of decline, such as the Amazon, the Mississippi, or the Danube. These powerful rivers were no longer what they had been because of pollution, overfishing, and human alteration. And Wade became both narrator and investigator, based on years of direct observation. Mighty Rivers showed Wade's more urgent, introspective side. The excitement of the chase was no longer the only factor. It has to do with knowing what happens when the chase is over. When the animals disappear, what happens? Their habitats are no longer able to sustain them, not because they have been captured. This wasn't an abstract question to Wade. He had witnessed the changes firsthand. Once teeming with life, the rivers were now strangely deserted. He had already noticed unsettling changes in places he had visited during River Monsters. This wasn't simply narrative anymore. It served as a reminder. His horizons were further expanded by the subsequent mysteries of the Deep series. Wade investigated inexplicable marine sightings, sunken ships, and lost towns beneath the water in this endeavor. His method stayed the same: curiosity without sensationalism, despite the looser format and wider canvas. He was not overly dramatic. He looked into it. In a genre that frequently uses exaggeration, Wade's serene, realistic narration stood out. Even the most outrageous anecdotes felt intellectual rather than gimmicky because of his reputation as a straight shooter. Beyond River Monsters, Wade's enthusiasm for conservation became more evident as opinions on the powerful rivers and the secrets of the depths were shared. The increasing strength of Wade's conservation zeal was closely associated with his purposeful decisions to use his public platform and attempts to promote endangered species, dwindling habitats, and the tenuous balance that supports freshwater ecosystems. It was an obvious message. These rivers serve as more than just backdrops or sets for movies. Millions of people, animals, and cultures depend on them for survival, yet they are threatened. Wade recognized that he was introducing these animals and habitats to many viewers for the first time. That was significant. So instead of drifting away, he leaned into that duty. He began writing about the value of freshwater conservation, speaking at educational events, and collaborating more directly with environmental organizations. He became more than a presenter. He became an advocate. And this was possibly the most deep insight. Wade's post-River Monsters work wasn't a deviation from the initial show. It was the next logical step. Because River Monsters was more than just a game about scary fish. Respect was at issue. Reverence for mystery, nature, and the thin line separating environmental survival from human advancement. That message was always there, frequently concealed beneath the excitement. As it happens, River Monsters was always really about this broader objective. The secret meaning of river monsters. At first glance, River Monsters appeared to be a show about enormous fish. It featured all the elements of a television thrill ride: suspense, mystery, danger, and exotic settings. However, those who paid careful attention started to pick up on something more profound. There was a subdued, steady message beneath the heart-pounding moments and unsettling legends. One that became louder with each passing season. It wasn't simply monsters that Jeremy Wade was after. Fear was being dismantled by him. He was instructing. Above all, he was urging the audience to view nature in a different way, particularly its most misunderstood creatures. In interviews, Wade has stated that River Monsters was never only focused on the catch. Indeed, bringing in a toothy tigerfish or a 200-pound catfish for captivating TV. But the actual heart of each episode wasn't the final struggle with the rod and line. It was the process of learning about people's fears. Wade asked 2 questions of each legend right from the start. What is this animal? And why is it so frightening to people? The show became more than just a hunt because of those questions. It turned into a sort of psychological journey that revealed layers of myth, misunderstanding, and hearsay. Wade often found that the animals that were most feared were also frequently the ones who were wrongfully accused. A fish that was believed to be a man-eater was instead a scavenger. For decades, a slayer species that was rumored had been misidentified. And the audience changed in some way with every revelation. Fascination replaced fear. Respect replaced disgust. The audience started to realize that these alleged monsters weren't bad guys. They were environmental products, survivors, and essential components of intricate ecosystems. At that point, River Monsters' second goal subtly became apparent. Each episode served as a lesson on conservation of some kind. Wade made the more general problem of environmental deterioration more relatable by concentrating on specific species. He gave creatures that most people had never heard of, much less cared about, names, faces, and stories. It became more difficult for viewers to overlook the fact that many of these species were going extinct due to human impact rather than natural causes once they got to know them and seen their strength, beauty, and vulnerability. Wade never gave sermons. He didn't interject lengthy talks on overfishing or pollution. Rather than portraying himself as an environmentalist, he recounted stories that moved viewers, which ultimately made him one of the most powerful environmental voices on television. He turned into a modest environmental hero who, instead of organizing campaigns or rallies, changed public opinion one incident at a time by using empathy and curiosity. He transformed storytelling into a movement in fishing, which is frequently viewed as a simply recreational or competitive activity, into narrative. The next monster wasn't the only reason fans tuned in. They tuned in to gain knowledge, explore a new environment, and comprehend an odd and untamed concept. And in a time when attention is short and distractions are frequent, that's no small accomplishment. Few television programs ever accomplish what River Monsters did at the end. It was more than just amusement. It changed the way people perceived the world. It served as a reminder that every myth has a valuable truth hidden behind it, and that fear is often the starting point for some of the most significant discoveries. Wade faced that anxiety head-on and inspired millions to follow suit. Additionally, the heritage of River Monsters shows that fishing was never the only goal. It was about giving voice to creatures that had none, protecting the weak, and shedding light on the misunderstood. There is no need for sequels for that kind of impact. Since it never truly left, it doesn't need to return. What do you think, then? Do you wish the adventure had continued longer, or did Jeremy Wade conclude River Monsters at the ideal moment? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. Please remember to like, subscribe, and click on the next video that appears on your screen if you liked this exploration of the hidden reality behind one of Animal Planet's most recognizable programs. We've uncovered more startling facts about your favorite shows, characters, and tales.